Next curve.
Hey everyone, welcome to Next Curve's reThink webcast and our Analyst Corner. I'm Leonard Lee, Executive Analyst at Next Curve, and welcome to this episode of Silicon Futures, where we cover the stuff happening in the semiconductor industry that matter. And today I have my analyst friend, Karl Freund. Hopefully I pronounced it correctly this time.
All right, pronounced it correctly, no problem.
Awesome. Well, Karl is joining me to set the stage for AI in 2024. And hey, Happy New Year. Happy New Year to everyone. Welcome to 2024.
Yeah, Happy New Year to everyone. It's gonna be a great year, at least in some regards.
Hopefully in all regards. I mean, hopefully we move to better, right?
Yeah, right.
I think that's what we all wish for at the beginning of any year.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But hey, folks, Karl is the founder and principal analyst at Cambrian-AI Research, LLC. He's a leading analyst covering the semiconductor industry, and it's just a fabulous pleasure to have him on again. So,
my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, welcome again. Happy New Year. And why don't we get things started? What do you think?
Yeah. This is going to be a big year. We always say that, but this year's different. And every year, there's only been really one player, especially in the data center, for artificial intelligence, and that's been Nvidia. And competition has, all the startups have the same deck. They show to their venture capitalists, and they say, hey, look, if we start out and make a chip that's specific, designed, bespoke for AI, it'll be so much more efficient than the GPU. Well, they've been showing that deck for 6 years, and it's just now starting to almost happen. So NVIDIA's lead is still substantial. But for the first time, you've got AMD with the MI300. There was a lot of controversy about the claims they made. The bottom line is it's a good chip. Yeah. And in fact, as hardware goes, it's probably better than the H100. It's got more memory bandwidth. Right. It's got more flops. But the software struggles to turn those into benchmarks they can stand by. NVIDIA comes out and says, yeah, but if you use our software, we're so much better. Yeah. That is, in general, true because they've got a huge lead in software. Be that as it may, MI300 is a darn good chip. Yeah. And you're going to end up with maybe, Lisa Su has said $2 billion in revenue. Mm-hmm. They've never had a product go from 0 to 2 billion in 1 year.
It's not too shabby.
So that's not too shabby. Now you've got Intel coming out with Habana 3. Yeah. They didn't really launch it in December. Some people said, Gaudi's. Yeah, Gaudi 3. What did I say? Yeah, Gaudi 3.
You were going to say that they were based on Habana.
Habana, yeah.
Right?
It was, they haven't launched it yet, so we don't really know what it is and how much memory it's got and how many flops it's got and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes out, they will have a pretty good runway ahead of them. Bottom line is, I think AMD's sandbagging at $2 billion. I think they'll do 3, maybe 4. Mm-hmm. Gaudi depends on when it comes out, but if Gaudi 3 comes out by the middle of the year, they can maybe do $1 billion. Mm-hmm. And you got Cerebras in the corner just counting money right now from their relationship with G42. So for the first time, you've got real competition. And you're going to see a leapfrogging effect like we used to have with RISC CPUs in the previous decade. So that is going to be a huge change in the dynamics.
Yeah. And I think, here's one of the things, though. I think when we talk about the AI opportunity, what these, it's always a confusing term because people are referring to different things when they use the term AI. But specifically, I think what we're reacting to, or at least what the industry reacted to in 2023, was the generative AI, let's call it phenomenon, right? Where we saw an early sell-through of a large number of NVIDIA systems, because, like what we talked about in the previous episode, NVIDIA is like basically building entire systems. Right. This is not just a GPU. And I think the vernacular and the way that people talk about Nvidia is as if they are selling GPUs. No, this thing is an 80-pound monster. I mean, it is huge. And the MI300X is in the similar vein, a system itself, right? I mean, isn't that what you saw in San Jose a few weeks ago or toward the end of last year, right? I mean, it almost looks like an HGX H100, right? And so, you know, one of the things that I think is really interesting, in addition to the competitive dynamic becoming a lot more diverse and vibrant going into 2024, is this like shift towards systems. And I think we're going to probably start to see Intel make moves toward that type of business model, because it's not just, I mean, we're not just talking about a shift in, the way that you're going to market with your products. It's an evolution of the business model, because selling systems is different from selling, let's say, chips. And especially in this HPC, AI HPC era, I think, like what we kind of touched upon it in our last episode, it seems like there's all these different fiefdoms that are starting to emerge, right? That are closed, semi-closed, open. And I don't know what you think, Karl, but I'm sure that you're going to react to what I say here. But it seems like Nvidia is in this really odd position of being sort of like a general purpose AI provider, a stack provider, right? Because like you said, they have the software, it's optimized with their whole stack of now the system plus all of the silicon that goes into these systems. And it kind of harkens back to the Intel days, right? They were kind of more the proprietary champion, closed. It's like it smacks of Intel in the world, right?
You're on an interesting point. Nvidia is definitely not a GPU provider. They are a full systems provider, first at the DGX and HGX level, but now even at the rack level, what they're installing at AWS. That's a full rack of Nvidia gear, which is then interconnected with AWS's optical fibers. AMD is kind of going down that road a little bit, but right now it's just at the board level. They're kind of, like you said, HGX level to get the density up, but also to take advantage of their high performance Infinity Fabric networking GPU.
Right.
Intel's in a different story now, because Intel's not using a proprietary network like Infinity Fabric, which is now supposedly open. I'm sure it will be, but there's not a lot of people jumping on board yet. And of course, NVLink, which is totally proprietary. Right. And Intel's going down the Ethernet route. Right? No. They are. So to some extent, what we may see is that system providers like Hewlett-Packard, HPE, and Dell, and Lenovo, and Supermicro may actually kind of prefer working with Intel when Gaudi 3 comes out, because it's more of a plug and play with an Ethernet infrastructure than a proprietary infrastructure. And the difference, of course, is how much margin they can make. If you're going to have to buy the HGX board, right, from your ODM, there's not much profit margin left over for you.
Right.
Whereas with an Ethernet plug and play, there's potentially more profit margin available to the OEM. We'll see.
Yeah. And I think that's where things are going to get really interesting in 2024, is how all of that shakes out. Because I think because we had this Cambrian event, as you called it, right, which is generative AI, and all of a sudden the shock that happened in the semiconductor industry due to it, people are still trying to figure out, well, what does that seismic event really mean, right? Because it was very evident in the component sales. Now, above that? What is it? And I like the point that you're bringing up with the likes, the OEMs, because in addition to their system sales, the other thing that they're doing, as well as Nvidia, you mentioned DGX, they have DGX Cloud. They're moving also, they're kind of diversifying into a SaaS service or a PaaS service play as well. And I think that's another area to keep an eye out on, because it also just it competes semi-directly with what the hyperscalers are doing, right?
Yeah,
Microsoft.
And finding a way to build and market those services while still playing nice with the hyperscalers is really critical. I think NVIDIA has done a pretty good job of it with DGX Cloud. Nova and Grok, spelled with a Q, not a K. Spelled with a K, it's suddenly a Tesla thing. Spelled with a Q, it's Grok thing. Anyway, they're kind of providing services, right? Nova in particular is providing AI as a service.
Yeah.
And in doing so, they're going to compete directly with the big hyperscalers and smaller hyperscalers.
Yeah.
Grok is sort of in between. Grok can provide it as a service for their inference processing, which is amazingly fast. But provided as a service, so you don't have to buy the hardware. You can just rent what you need, which is much better way to get access to AI if you're a startup. Building a model, or if you're fine-tuning a model, which is where the enterprises will be this year. They'll all be fine-tuning. The question is going to shift from, well, who's doing the best training to who can do the most cost-effective fine-tuning of models specific for a data domain.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the cost factors that hasn't really been talked about too much, because I don't think there's a lot of transparency at the moment. Is the implementation and the sustainment cost, right? And what I mean by sustainment is, now you got to host this thing somewhere and have to continue to maintain the model, because despite what folks might think, the foundational technology still suffers from a lot of deficiencies, right? Whether it's model drift or hallucinations or mode collapse, there's a lot of things that have not been solved. I don't care what anyone says out there. I ask this question a lot out in the industry. These problems have not been solved, but there are methods being surfacing to mitigate some of these, undesirable side effects. But it's still a learning curve. So, what are your thoughts on how AI is going to evolve? Because this is a pretty brand new story, even though
that's worth billions of dollars
a year ago, right? A little more than a year ago.
Yeah, that's the first time in my career I've seen a multi-billion-dollar market spring up out of nothing. I mean, I've been an AI analyst for 8 years, and I've watched it kind of progress. And now suddenly it's hockey sticks. Yeah. I think this is the year. First of all, we will solve we as an industry will solve the problems you just referenced through surprise AI, right? The best way to stop an AI from being abusive, profane, inappropriate for work settings and so forth is to use AI as a filter. NVIDIA has this today. The other vendors will quickly adopt software, probably open source software, that will help it avoid those pitfalls. I think by the end of the year, those problems are going to be in the past. I really do. But I think the AI right now, AI is a good talker, right? Ask Bard anything and it'll talk your head off. Ask ChatGPT anything, it'll talk your head off. I think what people want is action. Yeah, and I think people don't want to say, show me 5 different restaurants I might like. I think it wants to go to a state where it says, make a reservation at 7:00 for a table for 4 at a restaurant that serves X, Y, and Z, and is within 20 miles of my home. Yeah, that's what you want. That's starting to be possible now. Open Table, for example, is experimenting with that, as is Google, of course. So I think we're going to go from AI as a talker to AI as a doer. Have it act in our stead for things that we don't want to spend the time clicking and typing.
Yeah, I think when it comes to action, so in a lot of the conversations that I have with CTOs who are at the moment POCing a lot of these generative AI platforms and technology sets, they're carefully assessing whether or not these generative AI technologies that are available today are suitable for anything that's business critical. Okay, and beneath or above business critical is, mission critical, safety critical, all these things that require like an exorbitant number of nines of reliability. My observation, my chats, they're being very measured about where you apply generative AI or AI in general. Because it is probabilistic. It is, and a lot of these requirements for, let's say, 5 nines, 6 nines, and 6, 7 sigma, right? They require deterministic capabilities, right? I guess one of the things that I still need to hear a bit more, let's say, in an optimistic frame, is whether or not the foundational nature of these technologies can be addressed. Because things like drift, hallucination, it's just part of the fact that these technologies are probabilistic, right? If you want something that's, let's say more deterministic, you're going to code this stuff, or it's going to be an application of AI where it's very narrow and it's tested over and over again for a specific function. I think we talked about this as well before, but here's the thing. The way we talk about AI has changed, especially with generative AI, where now we're talking about more narrow, private, domain-specific applications where I think that's where the hypothesis of value has shifted. And I think it's going to continue to go that way. So if you want to call it edge AI or private AI, I like the way that Lenovo, kind of lays it out. There's a public AI, there's a private AI, and then there's like a personal AI, right? And the opportunity is to figure out how do you tune the technologies to support these different types of scenarios and use cases. And so there's going to be a lot of things that need to be built out that haven't been built out yet, like security. I mean, right now, it seems like a lot of folks are just superimposing a lot of conventional security, privacy, and confidentiality mechanisms on top of a Gen AI concept. But it needs much more than that, right? So I think that's going to drive a lot of how everything evolves through the course of 2024, because we got to get out of POC. It's like IoT. It's like tons of people doing POCs and then very few things actually.
Very few actual deploy. Yeah. Well, I think I really enjoyed the IBM session we had in Yorktown a couple months ago, where they kind of broke down the opportunities of low-hanging fruit into 3 big buckets, and they're huge buckets. One is reduction of labor, elimination of labor, reduction of labor. The second is customer service. And the third is in coding. And those are areas where the risk factors you've been discussing, articulating, are more containable.
Yeah.
Okay. IBM is seeing IBM's clients are seeing tremendous results in profit, and they are moving from POCs to actual deployment. So I think the key there is focus. Focus on what it can do. Yeah, there's lots of other stuff it could do, but it's not going to in 2024. So focus on what it can do in 2024 while minimizing the risks that you mentioned.
Yeah, and you know what? I think people really need to tune into us because it's a moving target, right? If you're POCing, because a lot of companies actually been POCing Gen AI stuff for 2 years. The public doesn't know about it, right? Generally. So this is not new, actually, for a lot of CIOs and CTOs who have been, this has been introduced to. You mentioned IBM. They're classic for working with customers on FOAK, what they call first of a kind project. You were at IBM for a little while, right?
Yeah, 10 years. 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah. The research team, they do these pre-commercialization projects with customers. So it's not a foreign thing but it's a new thing for consumers, right? And I think that's what ChatGPT really was kind of that tectonic shift or event or seismic event for the media. Yeah, you're missing out on a couple of other things that I think are interesting. I'll throw these into the hat. Gaming, so not NPC. Enhancing that can create some differentiation for a lot of gaming companies, right? Making environments more and character interactions more dynamic.
Especially the latter, especially the character interactions.
Yeah.
Instead of just reading a script, they're actually interacting on the fly based on whatever you present the characters, computer generated characters doing. That's an interesting area. But gaming's going to be interesting, but it's not going to be the massive profit driver.
No.
Right? I think the massive profit driver is what you mentioned a moment ago, and that's consumers.
Yeah.
It never ceases to surprise me how little consumers really understand about what the capabilities are.
Yeah.
Of something like Bard and ChatGPT. So it's not readily accessible. And I think once, Apple wakes up and starts, putting AI on the phone, Qualcomm's ahead of them, I think, in applicability of AI on mobile devices with Android. But when was the last time you heard somebody talk about how wonderful Siri is?
Well, you know what?
Nobody. It sucks.
It's interesting that you're not the first analyst friend of mine who's said this. I think it was in 2017 when Apple introduced the A11 Bionic processor.
Bionic,
they were the first to put a neural NPU on an SoC for a smartphone. They even had it ahead of Qualcomm. In terms of, and this is the thing that I think is really I don't know what they're doing at data center. I don't know, kind of a mystery. What they're doing in terms of enhancements to Siri, I'm sure that they're not blind to what's happening right now with generative AI, right, and its potential to augment, natural language processing and elevating it to natural language understanding. So you can have something a little bit more conversational. But on device, we've already seen AI. Maybe it's not generative AI, but AI applications on smartphones for a long time, right? I mean, that's kind of where the AI PC is evolving from, is this compute paradigm, this heterogeneous compute paradigm that's been has been part of a smartphone, the smartphone world for quite some time. So I've mentioned this actually on a couple of other podcasts, is this new application that they released with iOS 17.2, which is the Journal app. Go check that out. They're using ML. I mean, Apple likes to call it ML. They don't call it Gen AI, but they do run transformer frameworks on their SoCs. There's no question about that. They talk about it. It's just that people didn't know transformers were kind of associated with generative AI, right? But it does these recommendations based on information on your smartphone and prompts you to write stuff. And so, and it's doing a lot of contextual personalization stuff that we hear a lot about related to the AI PC, but also coming out of Qualcomm, because they've been very vocal and kind of thought leading, I would say, in endpoint or on-device AI, edge AI. So anyway, that's why.
I agree.
I don't think they're.
I think
They're just doing.
I think they're being very careful. Obviously, they have the most valuable brand on the planet. They don't want to screw it up.
Yeah,
as we've seen some demos do for other major companies the last year. They want to make sure it really works.
Yeah.
But at some point, they've got to upgrade Siri. Right? There's got to be a Siri Plus that comes out. And the question that I think I'm asked a lot that I don't know the answer to is: are people willing to pay more for it? Are people willing to pay more for a personal digital assistant that is actually intelligent? And if so, how much are they willing to pay? And is that sustainable value advantage they can extract profit from? We don't know the answer to that, right? We know Microsoft's answer, and that is Copilot's worth money, and we're going to charge for it. We don't know whether that's working yet or not. I don't think we'll know this quarter. I think we'll know probably the third quarter, as corporations take a long time. I've worked for a lot of big companies like HP, IBM, and AMD, and the size of their Microsoft Office licensing is just mind-boggling. And to think they're going to accept a broad, every employee can now access Copilot for X dollars a month, whatever they negotiate that to, is a big question that they're all asking themselves, and all stock market followers are trying to ascertain: is this a cool widget, or is this a profit driver?
Well, I don't know. Do you recall whether or not Microsoft was able to charge more for Clippy?
Zero, nothing, and it was worthless. That's why. So
well, at the time, it was pretty cool, right?
It was pretty cool, but it didn't find broad applicability because it just wasn't that useful. It wasn't that useful. And if Copilot can do half of what Microsoft says it can do, I think we're going to find it's quite useful. Mm-hmm. And I do believe companies will be willing to pay more, or will be willing to pay more to access that kind of capability for their employees. But we'll see.
Yeah. Or, what they might find is what we've seen with a lot of enterprise search products. It'll become more of a universal utility, because in my interactions or use of generative AI applications, what I like is the enhanced search. If we can net out the hallucinations that I do frequently encounter. I mean, it's a real problem, right?
I love it when Bard tells you something is patently false, and you say that is patently false. It says, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Did I say that?
Well, there was a recent news headline where a particular legal team had used Bard, and it came up with false or fake
precedents,
and precedents and case studies that were incorporated into a case, and that legal team is trying to back that thing out of court.
It's a mess. It's a mess, and that's why I go back to your earlier
credibility and trust.
This is why enterprises are going to be somewhat slow to adopt. They're going to be quick to experiment with. 80% of them are already experimenting with it. But going from there to actual adoption and deployment is going to be a real challenge in 2024. And I get this question a lot from investors. Will there be an air pocket in demand for GPUs? Mm-hmm. And I think there will be. I don't think it'll happen this year. It might start happening later this year. But right now, everybody's just trying to get enough hardware to try this stuff, right? And startups are trying to get access to cloud service so they can build their business model. But I do think in 2025, unless the semiconductor companies come up with something that's dramatically better, inference processing is still not affordable. So that's the problem they're probably going to try to solve. And if they can, then you won't see an air pocket. You'll see revenue shift from training to inference, as many of us have predicted for a couple of years.
And that is, and the clock is ticking. There isn't a lot of time. because there's a lot of hardware that was sold, and it has to produce a return at some point.
Right.
And it's something to keep an eye out on. And so next time we're going to talk about monetization and profitability.
Yeah, let's do that. I think profitability is going to be a good discussion.
It's going to be a really interesting one. But hey, Karl, another really fun, eye-opening, enlightening conversation with you, sir.
Likewise, same with you. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and you have some good ideas and perspectives I can benefit from.
Likewise, yeah, great information, and Karl, really thank you for sharing everything with the Next Curve audience, and I hope your audience enjoys this conversation as well and finds it informative. And definitely going to have you back on again, right?
Oh, thanks. I look forward to it.
Yeah. And so why don't you take a moment to tell our audience how to get in touch with you as well as engage with your research?
Yeah, sure. It's just Karl.Freund at Cambrian-AI.com if you want to send me an email, or at Karl Freund on X, which used to be, of course, called something else. Can't remember what it was. And of course, www.cambrian-AI.com is where all my research, which is typically posted first on Forbes, and then longer pieces of research, longer form research papers are hosted on Cambrian-AI.com.
Yeah, wonderful. And so, everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you want to find more of our conversations, just go to the Next Curve YouTube channel. Please subscribe at www.next-curve.com. That's probably the easiest way to get access to all, or at least get some links to all of Next Curve's media content, such as this one, and subscribe and tune in on a regular basis for a constant diet of the tech and industry insights that matter. And Karl, I think you and I are probably in like mind in wishing our audience a wonderful 2024, right?
Absolutely. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year, everyone.